Variables. Think of a variable as a labeled container where you can store data. You can name the container, put something in it like a number or some text, and then use it later. Example, you might create a variable called score and set it to 100. Later, you can use score to check how the learner is doing or increase it when something good happens. Why it's useful. Variables help you store and reuse information throughout your script. Well, let's put variables to use. We'll create a project. I'll call it Shapes. I've chosen the Activity Maker template. The Activity Maker template is a Swiss Army knife template. In other words, it's an all-purpose template. It can do many things, including scripting. And that's what we're all about today, is scripting for designers. And we're focused on variables. Because this is scripting for designers, we'll just add a touch of design style. So I've chosen the Design Styles Manager. And there's a variety of styles from which I can choose, but I think what I'll choose is Techno. And now if Techno were still in the cloud, we would see a download button here, but it's local. I selected OK. I'll make a few other design changes. I'll choose themes, so that gives me my themes manager. I'll change the HTML background color. I'll also make the inner background color, the page color, slightly transparent. Click on Use. And one more change. So if the header were enabled, I'll select Enable here to disable it so that we're basically hiding the header. This is the default header. I don't need it because of the Techno design style. Click on OK. And just to give you an idea of what this looks like, I'll preview in the browser. So LodeStar serves up the page, serves up the project to the browser, to the default browser. Here's our background color. So this is our HTML background color. And then here you can see the Techno design. Here's our transparency. So we have, this is about 20% or 80% opaque, 20% transparent. Good. That's a starting point. Next, to illustrate the use of variables, I'm going to create some shapes using the SVG editor, the Scalable Vector Graphics Editor. Click here. I'll choose. So essentially what I did is chose the basic shapes, chose triangle. There we go. I'll change the stroke to 6. This is the outer line here. And the inner color is the fill. Next, I've selected the diamond shape. And I'll go ahead and change the color of that. Lastly, I'll select a pentagon. Here we have our 3 shapes. I can also assign an ID to the shapes. I've clicked on the triangle. By default, its ID is SVG1. I'll change that to triangle. You must hit enter to be able to assign the ID to the shape. This is our diamond. Again, I'll hit enter. And lastly, our pentagon. Here we have our three shapes. I'll go ahead and save this. You can save by closing the editor, clicking on yes. Now, to properly position this SVG graphic, I'll select the graphic, and then I'll choose 100%. So rather than a fixed width and height, I'll make it a relative width and height. I'll also center it. I can title the page. Every page should have a page ID. Now what I'd like to do is make use of a variable. I'd like to select a function to create a variable. Under options, always select execute command if you're scripting. Now we have a default script editor here, but this is a more advanced editor and a much more helpful one. Now what we're about to do is create a variable. So basically a container in memory. We're going to use a function. Now a function, so this is just a keyword which represents the ability to declare a variable. So I'll call this variable size and give it an initial value. I'll give it an initial value of 0. Now a function represents a bit of code that's essentially going to carve a place in memory and label its sides, and then assign sides the value of 0. So we have a variable with the label sides and the value of the variable, which is initially 0. This is a statement, and all statements end with a semicolon. I can also test this, so I see no errors found. I can test it to ensure that I didn't mistype. Now it's very important to be case sensitive. So this is set, lowercase s, and uppercase V. It's also one word. Functions cannot have a space. Now functions essentially take an input and then do something with it. Sometimes they produce an output, sometimes they execute an action. In this case, set value will create a variable called sides in global memory. So this is memory that one can access from anywhere inside of our application. I'll save and close, and then click on Save. The next step is for us to create a branch option for each of these shapes, and then have that branch option essentially assign to the variable the number of sides for each of these shapes. I'll click on the SVG graphic and then click on Edit so that I can edit the graphic. Just reposition this a little bit. I'll select my triangle shape and right-click. I have a whole number of options here. The select branch option is what we want, and essentially, if you use your mouse to select, these branch options get executed. This dialog is just telling us, just warning us that we're about to assign some code to the element with the ID of triangle. Again, execute command. Now what we can do here is, I'll select the editor. We can do this the easy way. There is a function that is append value. We can do that. We can use append value and simply append a value to our variable. But let's do this the hard way. We're going to create a local variable. Now here's an opportunity for us to understand the difference in scope of these variables. Actually, let me, to avoid confusion, I'm going to name this something different. I can use the word size. This is the local version of size, and this is the global version of size. But to avoid confusion, I am declaring a variable, a local variable called number of sides. So essentially, get value reaches into memory, reaches into that container labeled size, retrieves its value, and assigns that value to this local variable. This is not an equals operator. This is an assignment. It means we're taking the value from global size and assigning it to this local variable. Now what we're going to do is use that variable. Now here is the old value of number of sides, really the old value of sides, with 3 appended, 3 for the triangle. And then we're going to put that back into global memory. We'll choose the set value function again. The name of the variable in global memory is size. And what we're assigning to that global container is the value of number of sides. So let's walk through this. These are each statements. We're getting the value from memory and assigning it to a local variable. Then we're taking the old value, so the original value of number of sides, we're adding 3 to it and reassigning a new value to number of sides. So it'll be the old value plus 3. And then we're putting that back into global memory. We'll go ahead and copy this because we're going to do this again and again. Save and close. So I'll make sure I copy that. Save. And now we're going to basically do the same thing for Diamond with one alteration. I'll right-click, select branch options, execute commands, and again, I'll retrieve the value from sides. This time, however, I'll append 4 to it because it's a diamond. It has 4 sides. And then we return that value to global memory. So we essentially assign sides the new value. And one more time, right-click, select branch option, execute commands, one little change, and that will be 5 for the pentagon. Save. We'll add a page, and the purpose of this page is simply to display a message that shows us the number of sides we've clicked on. Once again, we'll choose this branch option here. So this is a page level branch option that gets executed on page show. Click on it, execute command. So here, again, we're going to retrieve the number of sides, but instead of appending to it, we'll simply display the number of sides. One critical thing to point out is that here, this is the label, so we have to have that in quotes. That gets assigned to a variable. Now we don't put that variable in quotes because we are actually using that variable here. That's what we're going to be displaying. So whenever you do get value, this here has to be placed in quotes. Get value, what's the label? It's sides. And that's the label of the variable or this container in memory. And then we're simply going to show it. Save and close. And let's go ahead and preview. At this point, if it does not work, we'll be in the debugging stage. So we'll test this out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out. So now I'll just click on each of these once. Now, of course, I could add code that changes the colors of these as we clicked on them. Now we'll go forward and a message box will display 12. We've reinitialized because we had a bit of code that sets sides to 0. So sides is now 0 again. Let's click on just this triangle and this diamond. Now, what do you expect the message to be? How many sides have we, how many sides are represented by what we clicked on? And if you calculated 7, you're absolutely right. So that concludes our display of the use of variables. Now you can imagine what you can do with this. For example, rather than shapes, these could be coins. And then as you click on the coins, they get added up. So this could be a quarter, dime, and a nickel. And that might be a great opportunity for you to put this into practice, is to create a project that counts up coins. So thanks so much for watching.